Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. Returning guest and Dragon Quest superfan ChristophRPG is back to chat about Dragon Quest I&II HD2D. We get into all the changes in this new version, why these games still hold up today, and take a peek into the future of the franchise. And in the feature, I break down the Lawson and Dragon Quest collaboration and decide once and for all which slime bread is the most delicious. And I'll close out with some news, including the latest update on PokePark Kanto. Let's get into the games with ChristophRPG and Dragon Quest I&II HD2D. Old games, new games. What if there was a game that was both old and new? And what if there was a game that was two games? That's right, we're looking at Dragon Quest I&II HD2D. And joining me is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Christoph, and I am a Dragon Quest fan. That's it.
Thank you so much for joining me. Last year, we talked about Dragon Quest III HD2D on the podcast, and now you're back as we talk about the follow-up to that game, which is actually two games. And it's sort of not the follow-up because it came out before 3 originally, but it is a sequel because 3 is a prequel. So listeners, I hope you're following because it is a bit more confusing than it should be. But Christoph, let's go back a little bit. May 2021, Dragon Quest III HD2D is announced. Then 3 years of near silence. And then, hey, they have finally announced that I&II HD2D is also coming. What was your reaction upon hearing that we wouldn't be just getting 3, but also 1 and 2?
I mean, on paper, it makes a lot of sense. But I was still kind of flabbergasted. I couldn't really believe it when I first saw it. It just felt so unrealistic, especially because here in the West, there's been so much silence about Dragon Quest in the West. You know, Dragon Quest XI came out in 2016 or 17. So it's been quite a while since we had an actual brand new mainline Dragon Quest game. And so when 3 was announced, I thought that's perfect. We can have that and then wait 5, 6, 8 years. And then another one, which would be 12. But then they announced I&II remake, and it was quite the announcement. I think, as I said, on paper, it makes sense that they would remake the whole trilogy, but it was still just kind of unprecedented, kind of almost.
Yeah, it's not often they announce a game and then they secretly are making multiple games. So we got very lucky
Multiple,
there.
yes,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was pretty surprised, but that did explain why the delay was so long and why we hadn't heard anything about it. And also releasing 3 before 1 and 2. It seemed silly on paper, but as we'll get into, I think that was absolutely the right decision. So what's your history with Dragon Quest I and 2 specifically?
The chronology of Dragon Quest releases in the West is a little muddy, but the releases of Dragon Quest in Europe especially is even more muddy because Dragon Quest I and 2, we didn't have Dragon Warrior in Europe. We got Dragon Quest VIII. But then afterwards, we got Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6 on the DS. And I actually think that Dragon Quest 1 and 2 was first released in Europe in, I think it was 2014, I want to say. I hope I'm not wrong. I could be wrong because it's such a weird release schedule. But I first played it around that time when it came to mobile in Europe, which is super late compared to the rest of the world.
Right.
So I don't have nostalgic memories of Dragon Quest I and 2. It came out so late in Europe and it was on mobile. So it was kind of a weird little thing. And then I got it on Switch when the collection came. I have played Dragon Quest a lot before that. It was just kind of a nice time machine experiencing the first Dragon Quest games almost as they were.
Yeah. I had actually never played any version of Dragon Quest 1 nor 2. My first real deal Dragon Quest game was Dragon Quest 3 on Game Boy Color. And then I got into the DS games and so forth and so on. So I do have a lot of gaps in my Dragon Quest gameography, but it is a series I enjoy when I do manage to sink some time into it. The history of Dragon Quest I and 2's re-releases is pretty interesting. As you explained before, Europe definitely has a more unorthodox release schedule, but I'll try to cover the history of all the DQ 1 and 2 remakes right now. So, of course, they both came out individually on the Famicom/NES, and they were even ported to the MSX, both 1 and 2 separately. But they got a remake in 1993 in Japan for Super Famicom. And this is the first time that they were bundled together as 1 and 2. So that's when the 1 and 2 combo started. And in 1999, there was a Game Boy Color version of the SNES remake, and it hit the US a year later. And of course, I mentioned DQ3 also got a Game Boy Color remake, and that came out after the 1 and 2 Game Boy Color game. And this remake is now in reverse order, so it is just kind of funny to think about. They went 1 and 2 and then 3, and now they're doing 3 and then 1 and 2. But then after Game Boy days, DQ1 and 2 were remade again in 2004 for cell phones in Japan, which may be a port of the Super Famicom version or at least kind of based on it in some way. And yes, we're still going. In 2011, there was a DQ1 to 3 port on the Wii, including both the Famicom and Super Famicom versions. Of course, Japan only again. Then in 2013 in Japan, we got mobile ports for modern phones, which came to the West, America and Europe in 2014, which you mentioned, which again, I want to say are somewhat based on the 2004 mobile ports, which is in turn based on the Super Famicom version. So again, it's a very complex and complicated history, but these games have been remade and released time and time again. And then now we have Dragon Quest I and II HD2D. So I guess we should just get into this version. Since you've had experience with the games before, what was the thing that really surprised you when you started playing Dragon Quest I?
Dragon Quest I is a game that is very easy to remember because it is so simple. They made it so simplistic. It's a small world, a simple quest, and all the elements of you completing the game is laid out in front of you from the very get-go. So the game is super simple, also because it came out in 1986, right?
Yes.
And so they didn't have a lot of tools to play with and a lot of tools to make the game grand like we see with a lot of modern JRPGs, which makes the remake so much more epic. Just, you know, when you boot it up, you immediately see all the things that were laid out in the original version, but then there are so many extra things from the HD2D remake that we also saw in 3, a lot of modern elements that has been in Dragon Quest for so many years now were carried over, back over, you know,
yes,
to Dragon Quest 1 back in time, I guess. So I think it was just the overall presentation of the game was just immediately so much bigger than it were, but still also has the same elements and has the same core foundation. So I think it's just the overall presentation that kind of blew me away when I started the game.
Yeah, to me, everything is new, but I have been thinking, was that in the original game? But I have been looking up, and it seems like they definitely added quite a lot. A tremendous amount has been added. And I think one thing that really stuck out to me is that there are even more options in terms of customizing the quest log and the difficulty in general. I think originally we just assumed, okay, it's just going to be Dragon Quest I and II inside the 3 HD2D engine, which it is, but they did go back and think about, okay, how can we improve this engine, or how can we improve the options we give to the players? Specifically, you can now turn off the heal you get when you level up, which was not in the original games. Of course, in the original games, if you level up, you're not healed. But in Dragon Quest III HD2D, one of the big features they added is that your HP and MP go back to max once you level up. But now you can turn that off like the original games. What do you think about the added mechanic to these HD2D games where you heal and level up, and the decision to let players now turn it off?
The quality of life changes were one of the most controversial things in the hardcore fan base. That, you know, Dragon Quest is Dragon Quest, especially the earlier versions, because of their difficulty. You couldn't just waltz around, go into a cave and assume that you're going to walk out safe, and then you walk over a bridge and you shouldn't have done that. So now you just one shot and you're back to the beginning of the game. And as you say, when you level up, you don't get healed to full as you do in modern Dragon Quest and modern games in general. So I think that the quality of life improvements that they made makes a lot of sense, especially because they have to take into consideration how modern games work and what players expect from a game. But then they also have to take into consideration the original fan base, the hardcore fan base of Dragon Quest that kind of want that, you know, a little more difficult experience. So I think the change to give the players the option to turn those quality of life changes off is a really good idea. Also with the quest markers, you don't just get guided to your next objective. That's also a big thing in Dragon Quest. You get hints and tips about your next steps throughout the game in dialogue. So you have to talk to NPCs, you have to learn about the world, you have to make sure that you leave no stone untouched, which is a big thing in Dragon Quest. And when you have a quest marker, especially in Dragon Quest I, where the quest is very simple, then you'll just have a quest marker that leads you, oh, you have to go to Call now. But it would take away from some of the magic of the first game if they had quest objectives that guide you to a next step. So I think it's a good idea to have the ability to turn the quality of life features off and also the heal when level up. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, in 3, I didn't mind it. And in fact, I found it quite useful. But for a lot of Dragon Quest III hardcores, especially in Japan, many were saying, oh, this completely changes the game. It makes it too easy. I do get that perspective because the free heal on level up, it does de-emphasize items. You don't need to focus on holy water or prayer rings as much because you can just fill your MP to max if you just grind a little bit more in a dungeon. And since Dragon Quest is based on wizardry, a major element of that game is preparing a lot beforehand and making sure you're bringing in enough items into the dungeon, and you do need to make a decision to turn back eventually. So the item management in Dragon Quest is a major element of that franchise as well. So I do like that they at least gave you the option to turn it off for the very hardcore. But I still think the game is a fair challenge even if you do keep it on. We made it difficult enough where even the level up or the heal on level up, it'll help you, but it won't save you. And but you can just turn it off if you really want the authentic hardcore experience. And I want to talk about the battle system in Dragon Quest I. This game is really unique among RPGs in that you don't have a party. You are just one person. And in the original game, you only fought monsters one at a time, like a duel almost. But now you can fight multiple at a time. What do you think about this change?
I really love it. I think that when they first announced Dragon Quest I, especially Remake, we were all wondering what they were going to do with the battle system, because having just one protagonist in a JRPG is something that I don't think we've seen it since then, which is now again, 39 years ago. When I saw that we are actually just one protagonist, just the hero, we also get to encounter multiple enemies, and also some of the bosses are legitimately really tough because you are just the one person where you don't have a healer that can buff and heal the other party members, and then you have one dedicated to damage and so on. You just have the one, so you have to really strategize and figure out how you're going to get through each encounter, especially if you get an unlucky encounter with a lot of difficult enemies that will do status effects on you that can put you to sleep or even paralyze you, which is, absolutely merciless way to die in the game because you just stunned the entire time. And then you have to balance out buffs and heals and damage and figure out, as you say, you have to kind of prepare way more when you go into a dungeon or a cave. You have to figure out what kind of enemies will I encounter? Would I need a lot of antidote herbs or the snooze staff in my inventory because there are a lot of enemies that are vulnerable to sleep? All these kinds of things. I think it was a little worrisome how they would balance it, but I think that because you have access to so many new tools, spells, the new scroll mechanic, and so many new items, it makes the battles fair. But they are definitely tough. I've seen a lot of people having struggles because you can walk almost anywhere. It's an open-ended quest, so you don't have to always go from A to B to C to D. You can kind of do the objectives in a lot of different orders. So a lot of enemies are super duper tough when you first encounter them, which makes sense because you're not supposed to go there yet. So the balance is really good in spite of you only having one protagonist in your party for battles. I think they did the balance really good, and I think it makes for a really good challenge, especially later on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You do have to kind of rewire your brain when you're battling because nobody can help you. If you get stunned or something, you're on your own. So you really have to be very methodical about, okay, there are 3 enemies here. I'm one dude. What can I do to attack? Or should I do AoE magic or should I really focus on one? In Dragon Quest III, when you had a party, everyone kind of had their role. This person will do the DPS, this person will heal or do buffs. If somebody goes asleep, that's fine. We've got 3 other guys, but you are by your lonesome. So you have to be very thoughtful about every single action you do.
Yeah.
It is ironic that Dragon Quest I, which you could consider the grandfather of JRPGs, although, some titles could probably claim the title of great grandfather, but DQ1, even though it inspired so many games, it still feels very unique today because of that one-person party system. You mentioned before, you can't really think if it's been done in 39 years. I'm sure it has, but I can't really think of any examples off the top of my head. Very quickly, we went to a party-based RPG. So to go to a single-person turn-based RPG, that's still really unique, even in 2025. Mm-hmm. And my worry was that, okay, is 1 and 2 HD2D just going to be worse versions of 3? And while I still prefer 3 so far, I do feel like both these titles are unique, even when compared to 3. Sticking with 1 a little bit more, another major change to 1 and 2, I guess, as well, is that there are now ability scrolls, which give you special skills and attacks. And also the sigils you collect now give you permanent buffs. What do you think about how these are implemented into the game?
Because it's a one-person party that you go into combat with, I think that to have the ability to make your hero dynamically stronger, it also helps with balance. And sigils are kind of a way to make you stronger the lower the HP you have. And the scrolls makes it so that you have a lot of variables to play with and a lot of different tools at your disposal when dealing with a lot of different enemies with a lot of different strengths and weaknesses. So the way you can customize the way that you do combat is really great. And scrolls and sigils makes it so much more dynamic the way that you do combat. So I think it's a really great idea. It's also just systems that fit really well within the Dragon Quest ecosystem. Mechanics that are brought into new titles when we talk about other franchises. A lot of new mechanics and new systems can maybe muddy the waters with how you actually want to play that game. And then you have a system that you are forced into that you don't necessarily want to dedicate your time to. And maybe a system that doesn't really affect the way that you play the game. But in Dragon Quest, all the new systems and mechanics that they put in all fits really well together, because not only is it fun to explore, it's also something that you want to play with and something that really affects the way that you play the game. My biggest example of this is the addition of mini-medals, and I think that scrolls and kind of fit the same mold as mini-medals. It's something that greatly affects the gameplay in a positive way, and it fits within the series because you explore, you do combat, you prepare for a dungeon, and you do combat. And scrolls and sigils just, works with that.
Yeah, going back to the challenge of making a one-person party RPG, how do you make that interesting? I think having all these notable buffs and expanding abilities really makes your character very versatile. I also like that no matter what seed you get, you can just use it on your one character. You don't need to think about, okay, I'm building this party member to be a mage, so I should save the seeds of wisdom for that character. Just whatever seed you get, just eat it, because
Yes.
It's all going to you. So that part is a little fun in terms of who should I give this seed to? It's just all open your mouth and we're shoving all this in, and you're going to get stronger.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite thing about Dragon Quest I in general?
I think exploration is in general my favorite, because you get rewarded for exploring in a huge way in Dragon Quest. And I think that bringing all these new systems and mechanics into Dragon Quest I makes the exploration part of the game so much more rewarding, especially because Dragon Quest I was designed to be a world to be explored. And these new systems that they put in makes the exploration even more rewarding. So you play the game and you progress by exploring, by engaging with the world, talking to NPCs, going into houses, open chests, and all these different things that you do. I really do think that exploring the world is so much more rewarding with the addition of mini-medals and the scrolls and the sigils and just the new small tidbits of lore that you get throughout the game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in that these early Dragon Quest games in general, it really encapsulates the spirit of adventure, which you mentioned before. You get all these hints from people in the town saying, okay, I think something is east. And that's basically all you get. Just go east. But on your way there, you're going to find a lot of other stuff. You're going to notice some things. Oh, should I check this out? Is this my objective or is it not? You're going to find a lot of things that you wouldn't expect in your journey and in your adventures. It is pretty amazing that Dragon Quest I, even though there are many new additions, the core gameplay loop is really satisfying. And even things like the dungeon design in the games, I have to assume these are based on the original game's dungeons. They nailed it the first time. The dungeons, they are basic kind of maze-like labyrinthian layouts, but, there's always interesting places. You have to think about, okay, is it worth going down this staircase when I have this much health? Or should I go into this nook and cranny? Is there a treasure chest there? Or where should I go? What should I do? You do have to think about it, and it is really impressive how, even in 1986, they made some really captivating dungeons that, everyone kind of copied from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Dragon Quest I'm very satisfied with the game. I just thought, okay, this is going to be too basic. It's going to be too simple, but it's got a lot of depth, a lot of really interesting ideas that are not in the other Dragon Quest games. So I'm very happy that I'm enjoying it because I really do appreciate it as a truly unique title, even after all these years.
Yeah, that's good.
So let's jump into Dragon Quest II for a bit. I am still in the midst of 1, but I did play a few hours of 2 just for comparison's sake. And yes, it does immediately spoil what happens at the end of Dragon Quest 1. Be aware of that. But hey, you can kind of guess what's going to happen in Dragon Quest 1 if you've never played it. What would you say are, in general, the major differences between Dragon Quest 1 and 2?
The main differences between the two games are the same differences that were there at the very beginning in the original versions of the game, which is the overall scope and scale of the world, and the narrative is just, tenfolded. So that's just immediately what kind of jumps into frame when you boot up the game. The map is a lot bigger, the stakes are a lot higher, your party size is a lot bigger, the overall narrative things that happens in the game are just more lively, especially because the game is bigger and there are more characters to fill out the different narrative scenes, I guess. Yuji Horii and the developers and the designers, producers have said that a lot of things happens in 2 that will kind of be kind of major, and they had restricted streamers from streaming past the second credits or whatever. And so I'm going in completely blind almost in Dragon Quest II because I've heard that a lot of big things will happen, especially later on. And I can already see that a lot of characters are saying some kind of mysterious things, and there are a lot of small hints about cool things scattered throughout the game. And a lot of people are really, really worried about being spoiled with Dragon Quest II.
For me, all of it is brand new, but from people who have played it, it feels like they really wanted to make the ultimate version of Dragon Quest II. And then Dragon Quest I and Dragon Quest III remakes are just this nice bonus. Because it seems like maybe out of all 3 of these games, 2 was perhaps the most changed or has the most new content added, which is really interesting. And I think the biggest addition, of course, is the Princess of Kanak, a lemon-garbed hero that joins your party, making your group up to 4. So she was not in the original game at all. So this is a brand new character. And then increasing your party size is also brand new. And you do get to at least use her as a guest character pretty early on in the game. I think the devs really wanted people to use her ASAP, but they couldn't ruin the balance of the game. So they just let you try her for a little bit and then you can recruit her later on. So what do you think about this character, the Princess of Kanak? What do you think about her inclusion?
I am just a pebble throw away from recruiting the Princess of Kanak.
Okay.
So I actually don't know what she brings in terms of when you recruit her, but I do know that they gave her a lot of personality, which they did with all the other characters. But with the Princess of Kanak, she brings a lot of energy, a lot of life to the whole, to the narrative structure, which I really appreciate, especially because she's a new recruitable character. She also brings a lot of narrative into the game, which you get to play with. I think that's really good, and I think people were really, really excited for that prospect that you can actually recruit her. It's a 4th character to a game that had 3, which is a huge change.
Right.
It changes the game a huge amount, which also makes it, the developers also had the opportunity to make more challenging content and balance around the fact that you have a larger party. But I think her addition is a really good one. And I'm very excited to actually get her recruited.
Yeah, that's interesting that they hold her off for quite a bit. Maybe in the first hour, you get to rent her for a little bit. She'll join your party because the developers want you to know that this character is in the game. Many people are excited and looking forward to her. If you recruit her 15 hours into the game, some people might be a little antsy. So hour one, she jumps into your party for at least a little bit. So you can see her a little bit and play with her a little bit. So that's very fun. I love her intro because she is a princess. She has a very dainty dress. But then eventually she's like, okay, let me put on my adventurer garb. Let's go knock some heads.
I think you also get to name her when you rent her at the start.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. You get to name everybody in Dragon Quest II. Is this their first ever canonical name? Because maybe in the past it was just you could free entry or they were just called princess or something. But they do have quote unquote canonical names now.
Yeah, I actually don't know because I was wondering about that myself. I don't remember because Dragon Quest II is the one that I remember the least when playing. It's very difficult and it has the Dragon Quest I frame, but just, as I said before, is scaled up a lot. So I don't remember a lot of the game. I don't actually remember if they had those names before as well. But it seems like they have canonical names now.
The Princess of Cannock, I guess the default name is Matilda. And for me, I'm a little lazy, so I just gave them all the default names.
Me too.
Yeah, I think at least for Dragon Quest I and II HD2D, maybe they had canonical names beforehand, but I think they have new canonical names this time around.
Yeah.
It really is interesting to think about the balance of all three of these games. In Dragon Quest III HD2D, you've got a new class, and so you do have to balance with that. But Dragon Quest I, you're now fighting multiple enemies as opposed to just one. And in Dragon Quest II, you now have a brand new party member. So think about having to balance them in all these drastic ways. It is really crazy that they had to do this and that all three games, they're so different from each other. But that's also what's really appealing for them as a modern day gamer who's going to this for the first time. Because again, my fear is that, okay, Dragon Quest III, it was great. Dragon Quest I and II, I think they're just going to be watered down versions of Dragon Quest III. However, I don't feel that way. I feel that 1 and 2 so far, they both offer very different things. A lot of the things added in 1 and 2 are not in 3 HD2D. Even something simple like exploring the caves and even these towns. There are new assets in this game. I was thinking, okay, they're just going to copy paste a lot of the stuff from 3 into 1 and 2, which, they do for some assets, of course. The pots are the pots from 3 HD2D. But a lot of the caves have totally different designs and their aesthetic. And there's all these brand new assets that you didn't see before in 3 HD2D. So it really feels like, okay, this is not leftovers from the development of 3 HD2D. This feels like it's a big project. Are they treating it as equal as 3 HD2D, which is, what you want? Because the reason why I bought this game is because when they announced 3 HD2D and they announced 1 and 2, I thought, okay, I'll just get 3 and then I'll move on with my life. I won't play 1 and 2. But since 3 was so good, they really did convince me that, okay, this is on the level of 3 HD2D. And so far from what I've played, yes, the love and care and the changes and what they've added content-wise, I kind of wonder if the hour count of 1 and 2 is even larger than 3. They say the first game is maybe 10 to 15 hours, and they're saying the Dragon Quest II HD2D, that by itself is maybe 25 to 40 hours, which is kind of as long as 3 HD2D. So this package is maybe even bigger than 3 HD2D, which is kind of crazy to think about.
I think so, yeah.
Now, slight spoilers for 3, but 3 HD2D has a post-game scene that pretty much sets up 1 and 2. And apparently there is some post-game content in 2 that at least calls back to 3. We don't know yet, but they do ask you to copy over your save data, which might just be for the costume. I'm kind of wondering, is there some sort of story element as well? Like, does something change in the story if you transfer your data over? I'm not sure, but you at least get a cat costume if you have 3 HD2D save data. So how do you feel about this connection between the 3 HD2D games? And do you think the decision to go from 3 to 1 to 2 was a good one?
Yes, definitely. It's a chronology of the games. So that makes a lot of sense. They have put in so much lore and history in Dragon Quest. With the HD2D remakes, they now had the opportunity to absolutely blow it up to a point where they can express the story the way it deserves. All the small lore tidbits that I mentioned that are also present in 3, they now had the opportunity to really connect the 3 games in a major way, especially when you're playing 1 and 2 remake. They do so many callbacks to the Hero of Legend and to Erdrick and all this kind of stuff. I really love the progression of this story going through the 3 games. It really feels like more of a direct sequel than standalone games, which I personally think is a really good thing.
For me, if they went 1 and 2 and then 3, I would have just skipped to 3 because that's the most interesting one at that time. That's what I was thinking. I only picked up 1 and 2 because I thought 3 was just so great. It was one of my favorite games from last year, and they convinced me that it would have a similar amount of care put into it. I think Square did a very unorthodox but smart decision in releasing these games in this order. I can't think of another series that would benefit from remaking a game and then going back and remaking an older game and then connecting them in a major way. So Dragon Quest is very unique in that regard.
Yes.
But hey, let's look to the future a little bit. We are getting yet another Dragon Quest remake, Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. So are you looking forward to that game?
Yes, I am. Dragon Quest I and II remake were not expected, but when the announcement landed in my head, it made a lot of sense. Of course, they were going to remake the whole trilogy. They kind of hinted towards the announcement of 1 and 2, but 7 remake was completely out of nowhere. There were rumors and leaks, but I am always very skeptical about leaks and rumors because I don't know if they can be trusted. But this one was absolutely true. It still came out of nowhere for me, especially the way that they have completely remade the whole thing from scratch. 7 is a criminally underrated Dragon Quest game. I think it is so good, especially in terms of its story and its narrative, the vignettes that you play through. And the vocation system in that game is just absolutely perfect. Remaking that game is absolutely a dream come true. I was stunned for an hour. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
It is interesting that, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think a lot of people consider 7 to be maybe the black sheep of Dragon Quest is maybe too strong, but it is not one that is held in as high regard as, say, for example, 8 or 11 or even 3. So it is interesting to see that, okay, Square, they remade it for 3DS, but they're like, okay, let's have another crack at it. We're going to remake it again. And this time, if you didn't jump on board before, you're jumping on board this time. For me, I thought, well, they're going to remake 4 to 6 HD2D, but they skipped those for now. And perhaps they are setting up a reimagined trilogy of the 3D games. So
Absolutely.
Do you think they're going to go 7, 8, 9, or go back to 4 and 6, or maybe another remake like Dragon Quest Monsters again? What's after 7, for example?
I think the Zenithian trilogy 4, 5, and 6, it's absolutely in the cards. I think I'm a Dragon Quest conspiracy theorist because I like to come up with my own canon theories about the connection between all the games. I know there are a lot of people who know a lot about this stuff, but I like fantasizing about how all the games connect with each other and how the broader universe is connecting to this one thing or that thing or something. And also Yuji Horii himself, he hinted at a larger connection. They really want to connect all the games in a big way. And I think all these remakes are setting up this connection, which I think will culminate in Dragon Quest XII. But I think they definitely are remaking 4, 5, and 6. I don't know when it will be, but it probably will be the next remake they do. I think it's probably going to be after 12. The timeline of the Dragon Quest release schedule might look like 7 is releasing in February or March next year.
Yes.
Then we need a couple of months to kind of play that game. And then in the 40th anniversary, they will reveal a trailer for Dragon Quest XII. We get a lot of 12 content and marketing material. They will be hyping up that game a lot, and it will maybe release late 2026 or early 2027. And then I think they will build up to a Zenithian trilogy and do a connection thing with, I think maybe it could look like that. I don't really know. There have been some rumors about some development issues. Restructuring in Square Enix has definitely affected the the development team for Dragon Quest. But I think that the schedule and planning still holds. I just think that the timing has been a little more delayed.
Yes. In the meantime, you can play Dragon Quest I and II HD2D. Two very interesting games. If you liked 3, I think you would definitely like 1 and 2 HD2D. So put it on your radar. And if you want to hear what we think about 3 as well, we already recorded a podcast episode together. So go listen to that one too. But in the meantime, ChristophRPG, where can people find you?
They can find me on ChristophRPG on Twitter. I am working on some... I've been saying this for 2 years now, but I am I'm recording all my Dragon Quest content. When I play Dragon Quest, I always record it because I want to make videos in the future.
Okay, awesome.
But for now, it's just Twitter.
Awesome. And the links to everything are in the podcast description, so listeners, check it out. ChristophRPG, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a blast. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Today's feature is all about the Lawson and Dragon Quest collaboration happening right now to celebrate Dragon Quest I and II HD2D. Yes, I once again managed to tie in the games into the feature, so you gotta love the synergy there. This is not the first Lawson and Dragon Quest collaboration, nor will it be the last, but it is a fairly big one, and I wanted to cover something Dragon Quest related for the feature, so here we are. Actually, my original plan was to visit the quote-unquote Dragon Quest Lawson in Shibuya, which is a Lawson convenience store decorated with a lot of Dragon Quest stuff. I have seen this in person and thought it looked very cool. I mean, one of the letters is a slime, but then I started reading and realized, wait, it's not a Dragon Quest Lawson all the time. It is just a normal Lawson most days, and I coincidentally came across it when it had a DQ collab going on. And yes, this Shibuya Lawson did indeed have a Dragon Quest I and II collab, but it started a few weeks before the actual real deal collab with the nationwide chain started, and I couldn't figure out when it ended, so I didn't risk going all the way to Shibuya only for it to just be a normal Lawson. Instead, I decided to check out everything the current Dragon Quest Lawson collab has in general. That means mostly pigging out on food, but I did it for you, the listener. What's interesting about this collab is that it's largely centered around Lawson 100, which is an offshoot of the normal Lawson konbinis. Lawson 100 is part convenience store, part supermarket, and part 100 yen shop. They're a bit bigger than your typical konbini and sell a lot more random household goods, plus many things are priced at 100 yen. There's also a lot of unique snacks here that are under a generic brand. Do you want a brick of chocolate that has no company printed on it? You can take that risk at Lawson 100. The shop goes for quantity instead of quality, but I have found a lot of good stuff here. Years ago, they sold these amazing Japanese-style peanuts for a time, and I've never been able to find them since. What happened to these? And I don't remember the name either because it was just in a generic package. Now, a lot of the unique Dragon Quest food items are exclusive to Lawson 100. The main event for me, of course, was the slime bread. Lawson 100 had 3 versions modeled after the slime, she slime, and the metal slime, so blue, orange, and gray. These are a soft bread, almost kind of like a muffin, in the shape of a slime with the iconic slime smile printed on it. They're quite large too, so it can easily serve as your breakfast on the go. 7-Eleven has a very similar type of bread that they sell that is my go-to breakfast when I'm traveling by myself. And while it is good, it is maybe, 500 calories or something stupid like that, so only eat it if you plan on walking a lot that day. The blue slime is milkshake flavored. Apparently they landed on that flavor because at the time Dragon Quest I and II came out, milkshakes were popular in cafes. Now, biting into this, it definitely didn't scream milkshake. I know I'm a podcaster and my skill is supposed to be describing things with words, but it is a little hard to describe the actual flavor. It was flavorful, it just didn't taste like sugar, but it had a very artificial kick to it. You bite into it and think, this is not in nature. But the texture of the bread is very soft and very close to the 7-Eleven bread I love so much. Now, the orange she slime was custard pudding flavored, and I gotta say this was the best one. It actually tastes like what you would think it would taste like. The metal slime was coffee, my least favorite. I mean, I gave it a shot, but no way will I ever like any coffee-flavored food. So, slime ranking, she slime, slime, metal slime. The other major bread item was, I guess you would translate it as the mark of Erdrick bread. It is a round bread with Erdrick's bird logo imprinted on it. No crazy flavor here, it was just bread filled with cream. But I'm not really a cream and bread type of person, not even for donuts. But it is a cool looking logo. I do think a normal hamburger with the Erdrick symbol stamped on it would make it taste better. Next up, the onigiri. Lawson 100 sold 5 special onigiri, each themed after the protagonist of DQ 1 and 2. So the Dragon Quest I hero has an onigiri, and the 4 playable characters in DQ 2, including the Princess of Kanok, the new character. Now, I must confess, I didn't eat all the onigiri. I planned to, but I could only make so many trips to Lawson 100. But I did have the onigiri themed after the DQ1 hero, which was salmon and kombu, or seaweed. And these onigiri are not your traditional triangular-shaped onigiri, but are much smaller and rounder. But the salmon-seaweed combo? Good. I love salmon onigiri and I love kombu onigiri, but I don't really see this combo so often, and it works. And the other one I ate was the Princess of Kanok onigiri, which had mochi mugi, which is, I guess, some sort of barley or wheat, and takuan, which is a pickled radish. They picked this because of the green and yellow coloring, like what the princess is wearing. This wasn't as good, but it tasted fresh and it had some kick to it with the takuan, so it's a good, healthy-ish snack. It probably would have been much healthier to eat all the onigiri instead of all the slime bread, but it's too late now. There was also some jelly drink that honestly I couldn't find, so sorry. And also in the sorry section, there is indeed a prize raffle themed after Dragon Quest, but it seemed to be a generic Dragon Quest one and not specifically for 1 and 2, so I skipped it. There were some pixel keychains based on the Dragon Quest I graphics, which were a little tempting to win. The ultimate prize was Erdrick's helmet, and this is one of those things where if I was to win it, where would I even put it? It would just end up in a closet, never to be seen again. So I did skip the prize raffle because it was just only kind of loosely themed to Dragon Quest I and 2. Now, did Big Boy Lawson have any Dragon Quest things? Actually, yes. They sold the exclusive Yggdrasil Dew tea, which is a grape-flavored tea. These are in, I don't know how to describe them, but they are in these little plastic cups that you poke a straw through the top and then drink it. They are much smaller than your typical drink, but even more expensive because of the unique flavoring. They are always in their own little section in the konbini next to yogurt and other cold food. So they are far, far away from your typical tea, water, and alcohol section at the convenience store. It had this bright green packaging with some pixel art of the different DQ monsters, with 6 in all. Maybe I'm basic, but I had to go for the slime package. The drink was refreshing though, and very, very sweet. It was specifically a muscat type of grape, so kind of like the wine grape. So this is high quality stuff, as it should be, since Yggdrasil Dew heals up your entire party, and is quite rare in the game. It's not something that you just use willy-nilly. Lawson also had a Dragon Quest I and 2 themed wafer from Bandai Namco. Yes, they do have a fairly big candy branch, but all their candies come with some toy. I didn't eat the DQ one, but I have had the exact same one before. It is like a wafer cookie and it comes with a sticker or a card. There have been a few gaming ones, even for Tears of the Kingdom, but I was never really into these. Maybe if they bundled it with just one piece of Daifuku, I would be on board. So that was this year's Dragon Quest and Lawson collaboration. It felt a little low-key, especially compared to the Kirby one that I'll talk about in the news, but the slime breads alone were worth checking out. Bread in the shape of a slime. You can't do better than this. Actually, there was a Final Fantasy IX collaboration cafe in Shinjuku, and the neighboring taiyaki place, Katsugoro, did sell slimed-shaped taiyaki, and this was excellent. Slimes, they're a very edible monster. I mean, would you want to eat a rattata? Probably not. Dragon Quest VII comes out in just a few months, so will Lawson have a collab then? Will they just carry over the slime bread? Save that slime bread mold, Lawson, because you're going to need it very, very soon. Alright, that's it for the feature, so let's check out the news. February 5th, 2026. Put it on your calendar, because that's when PokePark Kanto in Yomiuri Land opens up. Tickets go on sale November 21st, though of course, it's a lottery. But they updated the website showing off more of the area along with the merch. There's 2 main areas, the Pokemon Forest, which has Pokemon scattered all about, and Sedge Town, which is modeled after a typical Gen 1 style town. I absolutely love the aesthetic of the town because it does look like the actual buildings from the original games. No modern rendition of a Pokemon Center or Pokemart, it's those blocky buildings with the colorful roofs. We also got a better understanding of the rides. One will be an Eevee-themed carousel, and the other will be a Pikachu-themed Dumbo-esque ride. There will also be a stage show inside the Pokemon Gym, so nothing really high-octane, but kids should enjoy the rides while adults eat and shop and take photos. It does say that kids under 5 are not allowed in the Pokemon Forest, even with supervision. That's a bit wild. Are the Pokemon going to attack you or something? Maybe they were just really concerned that a 3-year-old is going to knock over a statue, but I don't think I've ever seen such age restrictions in a kid-friendly park. But I'm incredibly excited. I'll be applying for the lottery to get there in February. The area was previously home to the attraction Pokemon Wonder, which I talked about on a very early episode of the podcast life. It was perhaps the best gaming-related thing I've done in Tokyo, which is ironic because I'm pretty sure the episode I talked about it is the least listened to episode of Tokyo Game Life. So if you want to bump up some numbers, go listen to that Pokemon Wonder episode, an episode where I talk about something that doesn't exist anymore. But I would definitely have an episode on PokePark Kanto once I'm able to step inside. And keeping with Japan-only Pokemon things, Pokemon Go I&II was announced. This is a Pokemon-themed version of the traditional board game from Ishikawa Prefecture. It's kind of a mix between a card game and shogi. So think of shogi pieces, but they have Pokemon printed on them. It hits December 18th, and there is going to be a mobile app version, but this seems like it's going to teach you how to play the game, and it's not some sort of game that supports online battles or even versus CPU in an extended way. But if you want to have a little taste of Pokemon Go I&II, you can download that app for free in mid-December. The Super Mario Galaxy movie got a direct, showcasing a new trailer and introducing 2 new characters and their VAs. Brie Larson as Rosalina and Benny Safdie as Bowser Jr. Larson as Rosalina is a great pick. On the podcast, I did predict that it would be Scarlett Johansson, and when she started talking, I thought, that does not sound like Scarlett Johansson. But they cast somebody who has actually played Super Mario Galaxy. She's a big Nintendo fan, and you can tell that she is actually going to put a lot of effort into the role. She's not going to phone it in. I'm curious to see if they play up some sort of rivalry between Peach and Rosalina. The trailer does hint that she has at least heard of Peach. So are they going to be friendly from the start, or are they going to be butting heads? Is there going to be a jealousy angle? We'll see. Benny Safdie as Bowser Jr. Now, that's a crazy pick. That's a wild, original Mario movie cast announcement tier pick. I wouldn't say he's obscure by any means, but if you're not locked into the American indie film scene, you might not know him. But he is a very notable director who has done some acting, including great roles in Oppenheimer and The Curse. His voice sounds a bit more closer to puberty than kiddie. More teenager than adolescent. And yeah, where did Bowser Jr. come from? The movie's got to explain that, but it is a comedy, so you don't need some crazy lore or retcon. Just a good joke could explain it. And like the first movie, they do seem to be pulling a lot from the other Mario games. Bowser Jr. has his design from Wonder, and Peach is fighting ninjas in a place that also looks like it could have been from Wonder. And we see Mario and Luigi in Tostarena from Odyssey. They've put a lot of pieces on the board, so let's see how they move them around, or if it just becomes a jumbled mess. I like the first Mario movie well enough, but now is the time to really get creative with the story and characters. And please, no more needle drops. Family Mart currently has a Kirby collaboration going on, and it's a pretty big one. The best item is, of course, the Kirby and Waddle Dee mochi. Listen, I don't think I've ever had bad mochi. It's hard to mess up. So I nabbed these, ate them, and yes, they were good. I do feel a little bad about eating Kirby, but he would do the same to me. There's also Kirby apple bread, some sandwiches, instant noodles, and even Kirby Air Rider clear files, which I have not been able to nab since those things were gone ASAP. Oh, and the Famichiki also has a special Kirby package if you get that hankering. But I just like to see Kirby whenever I enter a convenience store. There's also a big Air Riders banner in Family Mart, and there is a special lottery where people who buy an Air Riders download card can be entered to win Kirby headphones. So it is really nice to see Kirby Air Riders get all this love. Nintendo is treating it like a big holiday game. If you told me Switch 2's big holiday game will be Kirby Air Riders, I would have thought you were insane, beautiful but insane. Yet I am glad that Nintendo is really expanding what they consider to be a major title for the end of the year. But you know, most people are still going to be picking up Mario Kart this Christmas as their big game. And hey, we got more Nintendo sales data up to September 30th from their quarterly reports. Switch 2 is at 10.34 million sold, moving over 4 million units this past quarter. This makes it the fastest selling Nintendo platform ever, even selling more in its first 2 quarters than any Nintendo console has sold in its first 3 quarters. And yes, it is the fastest selling game system in general, outpacing both PS4 and PS5. And keep in mind, Switch 2's third quarter is going to be this holiday season, so expect some massive number there. Nintendo raised their predictions up to 19 million for the year, and I think they will easily eclipse that if they don't have any stock issues this holiday. In Japan, you still can't just go in and buy a Switch 2 though. The Pokemon Bundle refresh helped, and there is some random restocks every now and then, but Japan still has a major stock shortage, while that doesn't seem to be the case in the West at all. I wonder if they will be willing to expand the multi-language version to retail stores to help boost stock, or if they are still worried about scalpers. Though I don't know what other country they would flip it to, the stock seems to be pretty abundant outside of Japan. For games, Mario Kart World is at 9.57 million, so do the math, 10.35 million Switch 2 owners, and 9.57 million of them have Mario Kart World. I'm honestly surprised it's not 100%, but there are Mario Kart haters out there. And one can only assume they are playing Donkey Kong Bonanza because that opened up at 3.49 million in its first 10 weeks. A very strong opening quarter, and I hope it has legs and becomes an evergreen title because it truly is a fantastic game. I mean, I do love Mario Kart World, but if you're only going to get one Switch 2 game, Donkey Kong is an excellent choice, especially if you are a single-player gamer. Switch 1 has also hit 154.01 million, making it 0.01 million units shy of Nintendo DS, but it'll get there. Don't worry. Though I do have to question who is buying an OLED that's only marginally cheaper than a Switch 2. But in short, Switch 2 is performing extremely well. We are still in the early adopter period, and the world economy, sorry to say, but it could get worse. So who knows if Switch 2 can keep this momentum? But Nintendo has a lot of games already announced for next year, so more and more people will be flocking over to the Switch 2 ecosystem. And what are people going to buy on Switch 2? Pokemon Pokopia, coming March 5th. There was a 10-minute overview trailer showcasing the basic gameplay loop, and yeah, you build up a little habitat with Pokemon, enough said. They did introduce some new variants, including Pikachu, which honestly looks like a very sick Pikachu. This should be frightening, but the Japanese tweet introducing it has over 120,000 likes, so either people think it's cute or they desperately want to rescue it. Now, this game is being developed by Omega Force, who you know from the Musou games, but more specifically, Dragon Quest Builders 2, a game I've never played, but people like the Dragon Quest Builders franchise, and it is highly regarded, even among people who don't like these type of base-building games. I do like the more retro Gen 1 aesthetic, kind of like with PokePark Kanto. We see a real-deal Pokedex, not a Rotom phone, and the buildings do look like the HD-ified versions of the Gen 1 aesthetic. That thing at least has its hooks into me, so I am a bit curious about Pokopia, even though it's not my type of genre. Now, there has been some hubbub about it being a game key card, and if it spells doom for Nintendo's first-party games also being GKCs, as people call them. Well, while this game is being published by Nintendo in the West, in Japan, all Pokemon games are published by the Pokemon Company. So one could assume that TPC made the game key card decision. And you might think, well, if Nintendo is publishing it in the West, why don't they have a cart version for that market? I think having two totally different cart types for the same game would be a strain on production. I do believe all the carts are made at the same place, even though they go to different regions. So does this mean that Pokemon Gen 10 will be a game key card? I mean, maybe. Ubisoft did say that part of their game key card decision for Star Wars Outlaws was because the streaming off the cart was too slow. So if Gen 10 is not performing as well as it should be, and the game key card is the X factor to boost up the performance, we could see a game key card situation for the next big Pokemon generation. Maybe Nintendo would step in and say, hey, let's try to get it all on the cart, but I think we should all brace ourselves for a possible game key card situation for Gen 10. But I don't think this means that the next Mario or Zelda will be on game key cards. Nintendo seems dedicated to keeping all their first-party, all their EPD-developed games on a cart. So for first-party games, all of them will be on a cart, sans Pokemon, which is a special situation. And we got to save the best announcement for last. ArtDink has announced ArtDink Game Log, a project to bring their classic games to modern platforms. Tale of the Sun is hitting Switch and PC on December 16th, with Aquanauts Holiday hitting next year. Japan only for now, but both of these games were localized in the past, so I think a Western release is quite likely. Tale of the Sun is probably the most well-known of the older ArtDink games in the West, and it's a weird adventure game where you play as a caveman and your goal is to build a tower to the sun. The creator of the game is Kazutoshi Ida, which you may know as the creator of Doshin the Giant. Ida described it as an anti-Mario game, where the focus should be less on saving the princess and more on exploration and doing what you want it to do. It does feel like a bizarre offshoot of Mario 64 at times, but it is somewhat of a cult classic, despite maybe being a bad game, but it is a fascinating one. Aquanauts Holiday is another cult classic where you explore an ocean in first person with a similar goal of building a reef. I'm trying to think of what other ArtDink games could be part of this project. Now they are mostly known for their collabs with Square Enix. They developed Dragon Quest I and II HD2D, for example, but their most famous series is the A-Train Management series, where you manage trains in Japan. They did make No One Can Stop Mr. Domino, so we may be on the verge of him once again becoming unstoppable. But until then, let's wrap it up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well, it really helps. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. The next episode will be on November 30th. Spoilers, I'm going to talk about yet another JRPG. See you next time. Matane!